I made a ton of mistakes back when I was studying for the LSAT all those years ago. My scores started off in the low 150s and just would not go up for far too long. It took me an entire year, but I eventually got my 175 on my official LSAT administration. And looking back on it, I probably could have done it in less than half the time. So, when thinking about the biggest mistakes I made back when I was studying, I put together a list of the 10 that I'd like to help you avoid going forward in your LSAT journey. The first one is obsessively taking practice tests. I now call this the obsessive practice exam narrative. The idea that taking test after test is going to yield some magical insight when in reality, all it does is burn through valuable practice material. LSAC has recently reduced the number of prep tests available in LawHub, considering the new LSAT format without logic games. There used to be nearly 100 numbered exams. Now there are less than 60 of them. If you're aiming for a top score, you'll get through them faster than you'd think. So don't just take test after test. Instead, take the time to build your foundation first so that you'll be using the material that much more efficiently and productively. The second big mistake was using explanations as a crutch. Of course, when you're just learning the basics, explanations can be helpful, but they are just some other experts' perfect way of thinking about the questions. They don't relate to your thought process. And so you want to look at in your analysis, in your review, why are you personally prone to making these mistakes? What insights can you gain from your review process to help you avoid making the same mistakes again? Of course, you want to be using real, actual, official LSAT questions, which brings me to the third big mistake, which was using random hand-me-down prep books that sometimes contained fake LSAT questions. If you're using Barron's or LSAT for Dummies, give it to your worst enemy. These fake LSAT questions are themselves oftentimes full of mistakes and they're flawed. They're not realistic depictions of what the actual LSAT looks like. Some of them contain errors in the answer key or errors in the design of the questions. It turns out it's really hard to write fake LSAT questions. I personally wrote 10 of my own unofficial logic games and I learned a lot in the process. It probably took me 5 or 6 hours to write each individual game. These prep companies just want to avoid licensing fees. They're not hiring experts to write really solid questions, so use the real LSAT prep test questions. The fourth big mistake is doing questions untimed without moving on to timed LSAT sittings. Of course, doing untimed questions is not at all the same as doing timed sittings of full-length practice tests. Sometimes students will say to me, if I had all the time in the world, I'd get a perfect 180. And the thing is, you don't. The LSAT has a time constraint and it is not an easy one. 35 minutes per section is not reasonable, and that is by design. You want to make sure that you're not only working on accuracy, but you're also working on pacing and endurance so that you'll be fully prepared for the actual test day itself. The fifth big mistake is stressing about your upcoming LSAT administration. It's never just about the LSAT that you're registered for, because you can always retake. Law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores, but rather they only take the highest score, so retaking is totally fine. If you're signed up for the August LSAT, know that you still have September, October, and November available to you. The LSAT's offered 4 consecutive months this fall. You could take any of those 4 or potentially all of those 4 and still apply to law school this cycle. The retake limits are pretty liberal. You could take it 5 times in 5 years. So assuming you haven't taken it twice before, you could do all 4 administrations coming up. Not saying you should, but of course, if you're signed up for August, you might want to sign up for September or October in addition, just as a backup, just for the peace of mind. The sixth big mistake is burning through all your LSAT practice material. As I said earlier, LSAT's reducing the number of prep tests available in LawHub down to roughly 58 at the moment. You'll get through them faster than you think, and you want to make sure that when you're taking a practice test that you have a good reason for doing so, not to just churn and burn, but that you're going to yield some new insight regarding what should your pacing look like, what should your warm-up prior to the exam be, and of course you want to allow enough time to review your mistakes in depth. Never take exams on consecutive days. It's a recipe for burnout. I would rather you slow down and do more exams in depth with review and analysis rather than just getting through as many as possible. Which brings me to the seventh big mistake, taking practice tests without reviewing the answers, without reviewing or analyzing your mistakes. I've created a framework to help you review LSAT mistakes better called the Socratic Review Method. It's a cornerstone of my courses and my coaching. You can check out the links below this video to find out more and to book a call with me and my team. The idea, of course, is that we're helping you get that key insight from the questions you're getting wrong, because every question you get wrong is an opportunity to learn something new. And until you figure out which mistakes you personally are uniquely prone to falling for, you may end up making the same mistakes again, and that's what we want to help you avoid. The eighth big mistake is getting bogged down and bored by all those 500-page LSAT textbooks or phone books out there on the market. The LSAT just is not that complicated. You don't need to go through multiple or even just one of those big textbooks to get the information that you need to start doing real official LSAT questions out of the exams directly. If there's one big thing I aim to do through my courses and my coaching and even my free videos on YouTube, it's to make things simpler, to boil it down as concisely as possible. Start doing questions sooner rather than later and learning from your mistakes. The ninth big mistake is focusing on quantity over quality. I don't want you taking as many practice tests as you can possibly cram in. I want you to take fewer and review them in depth. Taking 20 exams, 30 exams, 40 exams, all of them timed without doing any foundational work or any review is not an accomplishment. It's burning through that valuable material. So rather, instead, maybe take 1 or 2 timed exams per week rather than 3 or 4 timed exams per week, so that you don't burn out and that you have enough time to thoroughly review every question you're getting wrong and every question you're having difficulty with. The 10th big mistake, and I'll share a bonus mistake in a minute, the 10th big mistake is studying only when you feel like it, when you're in the mood, without a consistent schedule. On test day, you might not be in the mood, you're still gonna have to do it anyway, and we don't want you deprioritizing your LSAT prep in favor of any more urgent seeming matters or tasks in front of you. You wanna have it blocked off on your calendar to make sure that it's actually going to happen on a given day. And I'll share number 11, which is one of the most important and stressful mistakes of top students aiming for 170 plus. But before I do, I wanted to let you know that if you're looking for help creating that personalized day-by-day study plan using my laser approach to LSAT prep, again, you can check out the links below the video to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. Now, that 11th final bonus mistake I wanted to share with you is worrying about burning through material. I mentioned earlier on the flip side that you don't want to burn through your practice tests, but on the other end, there is not really a limit to how much value that you can get out of the practice tests that you complete, because unless you would get a perfect 180 by redoing an exam, there is still value to be derived from redoing and reviewing that question in depth. If you're making that mistake twice or 3 times or more than 3 times, there's definitely a lesson to be learned there. Anyway, folks, that's all for now. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.